Don't tell anyone what Jessica does, my father whispered to my aunt at the reception. Just say she works in customer service. It's embarrassing enough that she showed up. I was standing right behind him, holding a glass of water. For 5 years, my family treated me like a complete failure because I walked away from the family firm to build my own tech startup. My brother was the golden child. I was the outcast relegated to table 14. But right as Dad raised his glass for the toast, the venue's massive broadcast screens cut to a national commercial. The Grand Oaks Country Club was drenched in crystal chandeliers and floral arches, the kind of excess my brother Brandon lived for. I checked my place card at the entrance, half expecting a seat near the front with the rest of the immediate family. Instead, my name was scrawled at table 14, tucked right next to the service doors where waitstaff pushed clattering trays in and out of the kitchen. I didn't even have to guess who arranged the seating. 5 years ago, my father, Arthur Vance, gave me an ultimatum: take a dead-end data entry desk at Vance Logistics or walk away from the family with nothing. I chose to build something of my own. That day, he declared me a disgrace to the Vance name, cutting off every dime and deleting my number. Brandon, on the other hand, was handed a VP title, an expense account, and the keys to a new BMW. As I walked past table 1, I overheard Dad talking to my cousin's new husband. Dad had a glass of scotch in hand, holding court. Brandon is the bedrock of our company, he boasted loudly, drawing nods from everyone around. Then, catching my reflection approaching, his voice dropped to a tense, biting whisper to Aunt Clara. Don't let the clients know Jessica is here. She's an embarrassment, still bouncing between odd jobs. Tell them she's in customer support if anyone asks. I tightened my grip on my clutch, took my seat at the back, and smiled. They thought I was drowning. For 5 years, my family assumed I was scraping by on gig work, barely keeping a roof over my head. The truth was far less pitiful, but infinitely harder. When I walked out of Vance Logistics, I didn't look for a safety net. I rented a 600-square-foot converted garage in an industrial park, slept on a fold-out futon that smelled permanently like old metal, and lived off 99-cent noodle packs and black coffee. I wasn't chasing a pipe dream. I was building Aegis systems. While Brandon spent his 20s flying first class on Dad's corporate tab, losing multi-million-dollar accounts due to gross mismanagement and masking it behind padded quarterly spreadsheets, I was writing code until my knuckles cramped at 4 in the morning. I saw where the industry was heading before they did. Legacy logistics firms were bleeding money through outdated routing algorithms and bloated overhead. Aegis was designed to fix that, an AI-driven infrastructure network that slashed fleet downtime by 40%. I never touched the Vance name. I didn't leverage Dad's contacts, and I didn't ask for handouts. When venture capitalists shut the door in my face, I refined the platform and pitched again. By year 3, we broke even. By year 4, we were profitable. 2 weeks before this wedding, I closed a $40 million Series B funding round led by the top tech fund on the West Coast, alongside a nationwide enterprise contract that would fundamentally reshape domestic freight. I kept it all completely off my personal social media. I let them believe what they wanted to believe. Dad thought silence meant failure, but in reality, I was just moving too fast to care about his validation. The dinner plates were cleared, and the soft hum of conversation tapered off as my father tapped his crystal glass with a silver knife. Arthur Vance stepped up to the podium, adjusting his tailored tuxedo, basking in the spotlight. To his left sat Brandon, grinning smugly beside his new bride, soaking in every drop of unearned adoration. Friends, family, and distinguished partners, Dad began, his deep voice carrying effortlessly across the ballroom. Tonight isn't just a celebration of love, it's a celebration of legacy. In business, as in life, blood is everything. My son Brandon has shown what it means to be a true Vance. He has stayed the course, respected the foundation built before him, and worked tirelessly to ensure our company's future. A wave of applause rolled through the room. Brandon nodded with rehearsed humility. Then Dad's gaze drifted toward the far back corner. His eyes locked onto table 14, narrowing slightly as his tone shifted from celebratory to cold, calculated condescension. Success isn't about running off to chase foolish pipe dreams, Dad continued, loud enough to ensure every ear caught the subtext. It's not about ego or pretending you know better than the ones who raised you. True character is about knowing your place and serving the institution that feeds you. Some choose loyalty and rise. Others choose stubborn pride and find themselves sitting in the dark, wondering where it all went wrong. A few distant relatives turned in their chairs, shooting pitiful, awkward glances directly at me. Brandon gave a quiet chuckle into his champagne glass. I didn't flinch. I glanced down at my watch. 7:59 p.m. 1 minute left. Dad raised his glass high, ready to deliver his grand closing toast. To Brandon, the only real future of the Vance name. Before he could finish the sentence, the ambient lighting in the ballroom suddenly dimmed. The 4 massive broadcast monitors mounted along the perimeter walls flickered, cutting into the national primetime television broadcast that the venue had synced for the evening's high-profile corporate attendees. A sharp, cinematic chord vibrated through the room's surround sound speakers, commanding immediate attention. On screen, sleek aerial shots of autonomous freight fleets and high-tech transit networks swept across the display. The visuals were cutting-edge, sharper, and far more polished than anything Vance Logistics had ever produced. A deep, authoritative voiceover began. The future of global supply chains is no longer on the horizon. It is already here, moving faster, smarter, and without friction. Dad froze at the podium, his hand still suspended in the air. Brandon's smile vanished, his eyebrows furrowing as he tried to figure out why the country club screens had hijacked his spotlight. Then came the centerpiece. The frame transitioned into a sleek, minimalist tech headquarters, revealing a full-screen graphic of a logistics command dashboard that had just secured a landmark federal infrastructure contract. The voiceover concluded with absolute clarity. Welcome to the new standard in automated enterprise logistics. Aegis Systems. Founded and led by founder and chief executive officer, Jessica Vance. A professional portrait of me appeared on the screen, vibrant, confident, and framed by national Tier 1 media endorsements. A suffocating silence dropped over the 500 guests in the ballroom. Forks hovered midair. Dad's champagne glass trembled slightly in his fingers, his knuckles turning stark white. The corporate partners seated at table 1 snapped their heads back toward the screen, then turned around completely in their chairs, scanning the room until their eyes landed straight on table 14. For several long seconds, the only sound in the ballroom was the low hum of the air conditioning. Dad stood paralyzed at the podium, the microphone emitting a faint, high-pitched feedback that nobody moved to fix. His face had completely drained of color. Then, Marcus Sterling, the managing director of Meridian Capital and the primary guest of honor Arthur had spent 6 months courting, pushed his chair back. He didn't glance at Dad or Brandon. He stood up, adjusted his jacket, and began walking straight down the center aisle, bypassing the head tables entirely. 3 other prominent venture partners from Table 1 immediately followed his lead. The entire room watched in stunned disbelief as the most powerful men in the room marched past the velvet drapes and stopped directly in front of Table 14. Marcus extended a hand, a broad, genuine smile breaking across his face. "Jessica," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly across the quiet room. "I had no idea you were Arthur's daughter. We've been trying to get an allocation in your Series B round all week. Congratulations on the federal contract. That commercial was brilliant." Before I could answer, Brandon rushed over, his face flushed red with sudden panic. "Mr. Sterling, please, this is a family misunderstanding. Jessica isn't involved in our operations. I'm well aware, Brandon," Marcus interrupted, his tone instantly sharpening. "In fact, your regional division submitted an emergency procurement bid 2 weeks ago begging to license Aegis's routing API just to prevent your fleet from defaulting on your Midwest contracts. If Jessica's company hadn't approved your temporary trial license on Tuesday, Vance Logistics would already be facing insolvency." The words hit Arthur like a physical blow. The firm he claimed was booming was standing solely because of the daughter he had tried to erase. As Marcus Sterling and the investors returned to their tables, the atmosphere in the ballroom shattered into chaotic whispering. I excused myself from table 14 and headed down the quiet side corridor toward the exit. Footsteps rushed behind me. Jessica, wait. I turned to find Dad and Brandon cornering me near the private terrace. Dad looked frantic, the arrogant patriarch persona, completely stripped away. Brandon stood behind him, loosening his bow tie, sweating through his tuxedo collar. Why didn't you tell us? Dad demanded, his voice hushed and desperate. You let me stand up there looking like a fool. If we had known Aegis was yours, we could have announced a formal partnership tonight. We're family, Jessica. Vance Logistics needs an enterprise tier license, or the board will force Brandon out by next quarter. Family? I asked, looking Dad straight in the eye. An hour ago, you told Aunt Clara to hide me because I was an embarrassment. 5 years ago, you cut me off without a second thought. You didn't want a daughter, Arthur. You wanted an obedient employee. Brandon stepped forward, his tone pleading. Jess, come on. You can't just let the family company sink. Just waive the licensing fees. We can merge our networks. There is no we, I replied, my voice steady and cold. Tomorrow morning, my legal team will review Vance Logistics' trial account. If you want access to Aegis systems, you will submit a standard application through our enterprise portal and pay full market rate. No shortcuts. No family discounts. And if you default on the terms, your contract will be terminated. Arthur opened his mouth to argue, but the words withered in his throat. For the first time in my life, my father had nothing left to say. I didn't wait for an apology, nor did I stay to watch the cake cutting. I walked past them, handed a $100 cash tip to the young banquet server clearing the tray station by table 14, and pushed through the heavy glass doors into the cool evening air. My black sedan was waiting at the valet stand. As the attendant held the door, my phone buzzed with an alert from our legal director confirming that 6 Fortune 500 accounts had submitted integration requests following the commercial broadcast. 6 months later, Vance Logistics underwent a forced restructuring, stripping Brandon of his executive title to satisfy creditors, while Aegis Systems opened its 3rd international branch. True success doesn't need to boast across dinner tables or demean others to feel significant. It simply does the work in silence and lets the results speak when the lights turn on.